You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. What do you get when you cross a boundary-breaking classical folk musician with an innovative and versatile composer? I'm not sure, but we're about to find out in the upcoming Manitoba Chamber Orchestra concert featuring mezzo-soprano Lizzy Hoyt and composer-in-residence Kevin Lau. To hear more about this intriguing and exciting combo, both Lizzy and Kevin have joined me in studio. Hello.
Hello.
Hey. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to begin by heaping on a little bit of praise. Kevin, we met virtually last year to talk about Prayer in a Green Cathedral, a work specially written for MCO principal oboist Caitlin Brahms-Jacobs, and I gushed about how much I adore your writing for its cinematic and accessible and idiomatic qualities. And Lizzy, we last spoke ahead of your performance singing the title role in La Cenerentola, which you were stupendous in, by the way, in Manitoba Opera's 50th anniversary season. In case it isn't abundantly clear, I'm a big fan of both of yours. So let me first ask, whose idea was it to put you two together?
Well, I think this came from Manitoba, and it was something that was discussed between Ann Manson and Vicky. And I think, whatever came out of that conversation, they just had this sort of brainwave of like, I remember actually getting an email from either Vicky or Anne saying, do you know Lizzy Hoyt? Because she just performed with us and she's fabulous, she's magnificent. And we just get this feeling that you guys might be a good match. And I remember going on YouTube to your channel and just kind of hungrily taking in all of these videos and going like, this is a really, really intriguing and special performer, and I would love to work with. And I said yes right away, and then just kind of was like holding my hands and being like, I hope she said yes back.
And Lizzy, what did you know of Kevin when this whole idea was sort of pitched?
So similar, I got an email saying that they've worked with you previously, and that the oboist had this lovely sort of collaborative experience when you had written for her last year, and would I be open to doing something like that? So same thing. Everyone goes online now, right?
Yeah.
And you listened to some of the clips that were available, and it was beautiful music, and it was interesting music, and there was texture and beautiful harmonies, and so I thought, well, yeah. Let's do this. And I don't do a lot of new music. I know some people really feel that is, something that they comfortably and confidently say yes to. They probably read music pretty well, and that's not sort of where I put myself. And so I was a little nervous because, you're saying yes to something you've never heard, and you're like, I hope I can read the music. And so I was so touched when I, finally got the music and started to work on it and learn it and just discover that it was so beautiful, and I loved the poetry that he had chosen as well. So it's been a really, really fun and meaningful experience, and it's the first time I've had a piece of music written for me. It's pretty humbling, and I'm really moved.
Well, I'm sure the audience is going to be moved as well, and I'm already moved. Just as soon as I saw this on paper, I was so excited at this pairing, and thanks to the powers that be at the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra with Ann Manson and Vicky Young. I want to get to the piece in just a little bit, but just to catch listeners up, in case they didn't hear our conversation ahead of La Cenerentola, Lizzy, you're a rising star in the classical music world and an already established one in the folk scene, and just this week it was announced that you're a finalist in the Traditional Singer of the Year category in the Canadian Folk Music Awards.
Yeah.
So big congrats on that. We've spoken to this before. It was folk first before you decided to finally scratch a classical itch. Mm-hmm. Can you talk more about the intersection of those two worlds and how it's made you into the versatile performer you are today?
Sure. I guess the obvious thing is that there's not a huge amount of crossover between those two styles of singing, especially. But I will say that as time has gone on, it's been an interesting journey for me to actually bring those different approaches together, and they always have helped each other. The things that I've learned how to do in my folk music have helped me when I'm approaching my classical music, and vice versa, of course. But it has been a journey for me to bring those two styles of singing and sound production and the way you use words or the way you ornament, to sort of bring those closer and closer together, so that I feel like at some point it's almost just color choices that I'm using, and I feel like I have many paint colors in my paint box, and so when I am coming to something, I'm trying to not just think, well, I'm a classical singer in this part, so I have to just sing it like a classical singer. That I have options, and that I can make choices in the moment and in preparation for how I think I can best color the music.
Well said, and really appreciate the analogy. So then let me turn to you next, Kevin. When you started to dig around in Lizzy's YouTube and watch what she was doing and in the variety of ways that she could do things and all of these colors that she could paint with, what does that do for you as a composer? Is it something you immediately want to explore and dive into?
Yeah, in this case, this was a huge strength of hers, I found, and something that was really unusual. I never really worked with anyone that had this kind of dual toolkit. And I knew that this was a piece where I wanted to explore stylistic discrepancies and kind of integrating different styles together so that they occupied the same space. Because so often in our music, we kind of do one thing. You know, you think of the classical performer who is raised through the conservatory tradition and can't improvise because it's just not part of our training. And I wanted to write a piece in which some of those boundaries became a little bit more permeable. And so the piece really begins with something that almost sounds like a non-orchestral piece, like it's something out of a folk idiom. And then it gets super operatic, and then it kind of like goes back in time into like very, very Baroque-ish sounding stuff. So that stuff has always excited me. I love the flow between styles. I feel like there's a lot of meaning that can be found in the tension between things. And Lizzy was just up for it, and yeah. It was fantastic.
Yeah, sort of living in that tension, right? And embracing it. And then I was, next going to ask you about how it manifests itself. So you've kind of spoken to that already. So let me ask you a little bit more about the piece itself titled The Ruins of Time. I was doing some digging. Is this a text by Edmund Spenser?
It's actually from a quotation by William Blake.
Okay. Tell us more.
Well, crazily enough, it came out of one of his letters. It's not even a poem. And the full quote is, "The ruins of time build mansions in eternity." And you have to imagine like a person writing that in a letter, like a casual, like that was like the equivalent of like sending an email or something like that.
Yeah.
And you just like throw that out into the
Yeah, completely profound. Yeah.
And,
also, what do you want for lunch?
Yeah.
And I think I had an immediate sort of visceral response to that quote, even before I totally understood what it meant. But to me, there was something about thinking of the associations of time, for example, the heaviness of the passage of time or human mortality, and the ruins of time build mansions in eternity. So there's something kind of transcendent about that whole image. That was just my starting point. And from there, I started to think of, what if this could be a song cycle built on texts that all had to do with time in some way? The many manifestations of time, the way that time manifests itself psychologically, because it can be something that is oppressive. You know, we think of the march of towards death, for example, and then using this sort of stylistic fluidity that Lizzy has, and also the changing languages of music within the piece itself as a metaphor for that. Like, it's almost like you're going back in time and you're going to these different stylistic periods in order to feel that passage of time.
Really fascinating, and so curious to hear how this all comes together. Lizzy, obviously this is a work that you've lived with for a little bit of time. You've gone through it. You've heard it for the first time, which is very, very exciting. And I imagine you've also examined it from all of your various vantage points, right? Like as a singer, as an instrumentalist, as a songwriter. So what's it like? What Kevin has created for you in the MCO?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting project to work on. It's been a couple of months now, I guess, that I've had the score. I think, the changes in sort of style, those are, I feel like maybe a little bit more obvious changes for me as I was rehearsing them. They seemed clear which points I should kind of do what. And so that sort of diversity was in there. I think what was also interesting to me was the way he set the poetry, and it's interesting here. I mean, we haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss this. This is the first time, but figuring out the way that all these different viewpoints and approaches to time come in through the music, and the different ways that humans interact with that knowledge and, as you say, the sort of oppressive nature of it or the freeing nature of it, relationships between life and death and the world and, I guess in some cases a little bit of religious notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's been such a fun journey to explore all of those things in the poetry and in the music, and to hear how you interpreted the poetry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it
Because
certainly does.
of course, I read through the poetry first, and you have your own ideas about it. But at some point, you are also working with the composer's interpretation of those words, and I love the images and the textures, and also the way that they are all individual poems that are set. But I feel that there's a journey from song one to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And one song and the poetry and the way they were written, they all lead into another way of looking at it. So it is a full journey throughout the 7 songs. They're not just 7 individual songs.
Yeah,
I hope I'm right in saying that. Am I right?
No, that's
Okay.
that's a great way of putting it. It's
Okay.
like one of my favorite things to do is to just sort of think in sort of really broad strokes. While each song has its individual identity, the order is very important, and the order tells a larger story.
Yeah.
Oh, well, 7 songs in this, The Ruins of Time, a world premiere that is taking place as part of this 50th anniversary Manitoba Chamber Orchestra season. Kevin, Lizzy, thank you for being here today. A pleasure seeing you both in studio.
My pleasure, too.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Anytime, truly. And very excited to hear what's in store at the upcoming Manitoba Chamber Orchestra show. Also on the program, 2 past commissions, music of Jeffrey Ryan and Karen Sunabaka, and some Boccherini, because, well, why not, I suppose, because Boccherini is delightful. All led by guest conductor Julian Pelicano. You can find more details up at classic107.com or themco.ca.